In August 1977, deep in the hills of southern Spain, a young woman reported an encounter with two tall, silent figures glowing like emergency chem-lights underwater. Like visions of saints, visceral spirits, or spatially disjunct embodiments, but visibly not so. What happened on that narrow footpath? And what did investigators make of the strange facts that lined up before them? Fascinatingly enough, the case presents a concentrated set of anomalous features that is interesting to explore: directed light emission, spatial instability, non-communicative deterrent behavior, and short-duration temporal displacement. But first, let's review the timeline of this strange encounter. The case came to light through the Spanish radio program No Estamos Solos, We Are Not Alone, directed and produced by Alfonso Contreras. On August 14, 1977, the program reported on a news item that had appeared in the press 4 days earlier. The article described an encounter experienced by a young woman near the small town of Almonaster la Real in the province of Huelva, Spain. According to the report, she claimed to have seen two strange beings while walking from her village to a neighboring one, where she was going to help her grandmother. Following this broadcast, Alfonso Contreras responded by assigning the investigation to the Ceferina Ufology Group. On Saturday, August 20th, a field team from the group traveled to the location where the event had reportedly taken place. They arrived in the village of Escalada, where the witness Ceferina Vargas lived. It is reached via a dirt road with countless bends and surrounded by forest. Deep in the Sierra Morena, the mountains, fords, and landscapes are varied and striking. Few people live in Escalada, and those who do have all known each other their entire lives. Their livelihoods revolve around farming, livestock, timber, and cork. About 3 or 4 kilometers away is the village of La Corte, which shares similar features as Escalada. Locals travel between the two villages, using narrow footpaths that wind through dense vegetation, gorges and fords at the base of the mountains. The strange event happened along one of these trails. The exact spot is located at the foot of a tall hill, along the bed of a small stream that is barely visible due to the thick undergrowth and surrounding vegetation. In the direction the witness was walking, the stream was to the right, only perceptible by the sound of the water, while to the left stood the mountain, covered with pine trees. On both sides of the path there were many shrubs, rocks, and trees. Ceferina Vargas was a 20-year-old unmarried woman who struck the investigators as balanced, calm, with a certain maturity. The people in the village spoke well of her. They said she had never shown signs of nervous trouble, hallucinations, or anything like that. They described her as a normal young woman who often spent some of her free time with them, as one of their own. She came across as a bit modern and even shared a cigarette with them. She was friendly and answered all the questions they asked, helping them piece together a composite sketch of the beings she claimed to have seen. On Wednesday, August 3rd, 1977, at around 7:30 in the evening, after listening to her usual radio drama, Ceferina left her house in Escalada. She set out along the path in the direction of La Corte, intending to help her grandmother with housework, since the local village festival was only 2 days away. Ceferina was carrying her handbag, which held, among other things, her ID card and some used bus tickets. Around 7:55, Ceferina was walking along the path in an area where a small stream runs beside it and becomes visible for a few meters. The mountains rose close on either side, and the thick vegetation allowed through only the last traces of daylight. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and its rays no longer reached this natural gorge. As she climbed a small rise, she felt a coldness along her back, a deep chill that made her think something was wrong, that something was not as it should be. She walked on a little further, turned her head, and saw a glint of light. At first, she thought it might be a shard of glass catching the dying light, perhaps something washed down from the riverbank after the rain. The idea seemed within the realm of possibility, with the sun sinking low and its fading light still able to reflect off a piece of glass. But almost immediately she understood that it was not glass at all. It was something entirely different. The white light was dazzling, about the size of a bicycle headlamp, and it disturbed her vision, straining her eyes. She continued along the narrow trail, wanting to move faster, but even as she tried to speed up, she felt as if something was holding her back. The cold sensation along her spine did not leave her. 15 or 20 meters further along, another beam of white light struck her directly in the face from the side of the path. It overwhelmed her vision, so strong that she instinctively raised her hands to shield her eyes. Being high-strung by nature, and now stirred by a sudden fear, perhaps from the light, Ceferina felt her strength giving way. Then very suddenly, she saw two strange figures standing about 4 meters ahead of her on the path. She realized they were there the moment the blinding light disappeared. In the exact spot where the light had been, she now saw two beings, a very tall woman and a man who was shorter but still broad and solidly built. According to the witness, the woman, if you could call her that, stood about 2 meters tall, while the man was roughly 1.70 meters. Their faces were unsettling, though Ceferina could not explain exactly why. The woman had platinum blonde hair that reached halfway down her back, combed straight back but without revealing her ears. Her eyes were very large, and her arched eyebrows stretched from above the eyes up toward the middle of her forehead. Ceferina could not say for sure whether she had a nose, though she had the impression there were two small openings where one should have been. Where the mouth should have been, there was only a thin line that moved without opening, giving the impression that she was speaking, while she gestured slowly with her arms. She wore a dark green tunic that seemed to shimmer, as if it were covered in countless tiny lights. The neckline was round and stretched from shoulder to shoulder, with wide sleeves that hung down to the level of the hands. The garment reached all the way to the ground, and no feet or shoes were visible. As for the hands, the witness could not describe them, as she did not look at them. The being had no visible anatomical features that would clearly identify her as a woman, though these may have been concealed by the tunic. The man had the same facial features and remained completely still. His hair was shorter and slightly tousled. He wore a light brown tunic with a faint shimmer that reached just below the knees. From that point to the ground, he had on a second, narrower tunic, darker in color, also with a shimmer and a vertical wavy line running down the front. The design on this tunic was similar to the one worn by the other figure. Both had skin the color of lemon yellow. The witness stated that she heard no sounds or voices during the encounter, nor did she notice any scent that differed from the natural smells of the area. The beings never approached her and seemed completely indifferent to her presence. Feeling her strength vanish, Ceferina lowered herself onto a rock and passed out without warning. When she came to her senses, the figures were gone. She ran straight home, shaken and overwhelmed, and reached the house at around 10 minutes to 9. At the entrance to the village, Ceferina opened her handbag to see if anything was missing and saw that her identity card was gone. She also noticed that the crown of her wristwatch, the small knob used to wind it or set the time, was missing. That first night, still in shock, Ceferina woke up suddenly and told her mother there were animals in the house. Her nerves stayed frayed for several days. She was examined by a doctor who found nothing unusual and prescribed only 2 sedatives to help her sleep. Soon after, a search was carried out in the area by local men, and then the next day by the civil guard. They found only a few used bus tickets that belonged to Ceferina and some MSA razor blades, which the witness believed had been left by goat herds and herders who often used the trail. No strange traces were found. Neither her identity card nor the missing part of her watch was ever recovered. Following close behind these searches, the first investigators from UFO Garina arrived at the scene and experienced something unusual. When they tried to photograph the exact spot where the encounter had taken place, the camera's flash would charge as normal, but when they pressed the shutter, it would not fire. Yet if they stepped just 20 or 30 meters away, The flash worked perfectly. Because of the highly unusual features of the case, which the investigators felt showed no clear similarity to other known contact reports in the history of ufology, and working from the assumption that the facts presented in this report are accurate, they proposed the following theories about what may have occurred during Ceferina's experience. To begin with, they considered the possibility that somewhere along the path she was following, there may have been a craft temporarily present. This could have been a vehicle in transit, an exploration disk, or even a vessel under repair. Such a presence might have been visible to the witness. In support of this idea, they referred to previous cases, including that of Adrian Sanchez and the reported UFO repair incident in New York, as described in the magazine Stendek, dated June 28, 1977. In addition, the team suggested that the beings encountered by Ceferina may not have wished to be discovered while in the middle of some activity. It is possible they tried to scare her away using the first blinding light. When that failed, and she continued forward, the investigators speculated that the entities may have decided to block her path completely. This would explain the second flash of light and the sudden appearance of the figures standing ahead of her on the trail, without ever approaching her directly. The investigators also considered the loss of her identity card and the crown of her watch. These could have been lost during a fall when she fainted or while she was running back to the village. Even so, the missing identity card raised questions, since it had been stored in an interior pocket of her handbag. For this reason, they could not rule out the possibility that the objects had been deliberately removed or replaced for reasons beyond current understanding. Finally, the timeline was examined. Ceferina left her house at approximately 7:30 p.m. The walk to the site of the event would have taken about 20 minutes. Running back, she could have covered the distance in about 10. In total, the trip out and back should have taken no more than 30 to 35 minutes. However, she returned home at around 8:50 p.m. This leaves a blank period of roughly 45 to 50 minutes, during which the witness was unconscious. It remains unknown whether she stayed in the same place for the entire duration. The Escalada event is analytically significant for the form of contact it establishes. It has a number of features that are interesting to reflect on. For instance, how the contact is directed and expressed through light, fixed position, and perceptual disruption. If the beings deliberately projected light and then moved to obstruct the witness's view, it is likely they were trying to shield something, whether an object or an activity. Yet no visible craft was observed. Investigators considered the presence of a landed craft the most plausible explanation, since a stationary object would explain the being's efforts to intervene. Still, other interpretations may be just as worth considering. To Ceferina, the presence of technologically enhanced clothing was what set the beings apart from anything earthly. What could have been the function of their unusual robes? The shimmering design may have served as environmental protection, camouflage, or a deliberate visual display. Perhaps even a symbolic deterrent tailored to this specific encounter. At no point did Ceferina interpret the figures as religious or visionary. She never used any language of sanctity, revelation, or transcendence in her account. Her description remained grounded in physical perception and immediate physiological reaction. The experience was framed not as a visitation, but as an encounter with something external, grounded and unknown. This absence of symbolic interpretation contrasts with historical patterns in which similar events were framed as angelic, demonic, or visionary. Ceferina described what she perceived, not what it meant. Decades later, in 2013, she spoke again about that night. The years in between had brought her the weight and perspective of maturity, yet she recounted the events with a vividness and sharpness that had not faded. Time had done nothing to lessen the strangeness of what she had lived through, and her account was as steadfast as it had ever been. What do you think about Ceferina's experience? Do you see this as a purely physical encounter, or might there be layers of meaning beyond what she perceived? How important do you think it is that she did not interpret this event in religious or visionary terms? Share your take in the comments below. As always here on Stories Lost, We leave it to you to form your own judgment on these events. This case was published in Lumière dans la Nuit, number 174, from 1978. We appreciate you guys and girls tuning in. If you want to support the channel, it's as easy as dropping a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll hopefully see you in the next episode. Take care, and stay curious. And now for a special thanks for those of you that are especially special. See you next Friday when we go to Sweden and one of the coldest winters in living memory.